Hey everybody, welcome to the Back to Brilliance podcast. We're your hosts, Henry and Joseph. Thanks for tuning in. We ask that you would subscribe and leave a comment or a review. It helps great people like you find our podcast. And with that, today we're going to get into our topic. We're talking about how to standardize a Grand Slam offer. In this episode, we prove why the most scalable businesses are built on the simple offer. We strip away the theory and focus on the mechanics and how to replace custom chaos with a streamlined, standardized protocol. So with that, guys, we're going to get a little bit more deeper into that, but I want to bring on our co-host, Joseph. Joseph, say what's up and take it away, brother.
Hey, everybody. How's it going? So today I wanted to talk about offer building because it's something that I've been working on for the past, let's just say a month. I've really been trying to reinvent my approach for this year, kind of recalibrate and kind of improve upon what I did last year and, go forward with it. And refining your offer is a great place to start because that is fundamentally what you're going to be approaching people with as far as, hey, trust me to fix your business or trust me to help serve you, right? And so being able to refine your offer is really key because that is what will get your foot through the door. That's what gets you business, right? It all starts from the offer.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that keep it simple, mentality, and a lot of times, you might have a great product, a great service, a great offer to offer somebody, but sometimes if it's confusing and they're not understanding, the confused mind never really buys, right? So that's what we want to kind of go through is just showing you a way to, standardize that offer and to kind of simplify it in the best way possible. A lot of times we're so excited about our product and our service and we know the benefit that it can do, but we end up overselling the features and all the things that it can do, where all the person wants to really see as a buyer is what's the result and how it benefits them. So we're going to go through that a little bit today and we'll continue and break that down, and hopefully, the tips that we share here, benefit you and help you in, your process.
Exactly. Yeah. And the biggest one that I've really learned or, that I've been really trying to get down is creating a standardized offer, right? Something that is a standard service, right? So, let's just say a car mechanic, right? A car mechanic is like, okay, we'll just change your oil, right? And then you go to that place a couple times, and then you're like, you know what? I'm gonna get my tires aligned, right? You're the buyer saying, I'm gonna get this X, Y, and Z done from the place that I got my oil changed from, right? And so they're not gonna be like, hey, we're gonna service your car, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. No, it all starts from we're just gonna change your oil, right? And so that's like kind of what you want your offer to be, which is something very simple in concept or in nature, and it's not super customizable, right? At least the base package or your base offer, right? So that's something that I've always had a lot of issues with because I came from a graphic design background where, your offer is, hey, I'm going to build you or I'm going to make a logo for you, or hey, I'm going to build you a website. All of that is very hands-on and very customizable. But what your offer should be is something very standard, something that, is like a template or something that allows you to repeat it over and over and over and over again without any real customization.
Right. So it's sort of like a cookie cutter, you just set it, and it just works. So that's one way, to really ensure, that they're getting the benefit from the service or the product that you're providing, and that just goes with anything, because if you look at we'll take a program, like Microsoft Excel, for example, it has so many features that probably the majority of people don't even use, You know what I mean? So in theory, that's why a lot of these other companies that popped up, that do, spreadsheets and do all these things and make everything a lot easier, because you're only used to using certain things. And that's kind of how people become, is like creatures of habit, right? So when you're providing a product and you try to oversell and it does all this, but wait, there's more, you kind of tend to overwhelm people with it. So I guess the idea there would be just, less is more in this arena, and it helps the people, because the whole overall goal is that your product or service should help somebody in a specific area, as opposed to being like a jack of all trades where your product is doing everything. Because then when you try to do everything, you actually do nothing. So when you're tailoring your product or your service, you want to make it specific, simple for them to understand, and they understand from A to B on how things are going to work.
Exactly, right. And an example that I've heard before is a microwave, right? A microwave, what do they say? It just reheats your food, right? But it could do a little bit more than that, right? There's more features to it. But if a microwave salesman was like, hey, it like radiates your food, and it makes the water molecules, if they explain the whole process of how a microwave works, you're probably not going to buy a microwave. But everyone can understand, hey, I need to reheat my food, and that's what it does, right? So that's kind of what you want your offer to be, which is something that serves a purpose, and it's very clear, like Henry just said, like, from point A to point Z, right? What exactly does it entail? And then from there you can go up, right? Depending on what your business model is and depending on what you offer, but like, have some way to kind of, start very basic. That way you don't overwhelm anyone, and it's more consistent, right? And also something to think about while you're trying to create your offer is to really map out and chart things that are not teachable or valuable, right? Or maybe something that is like not, maybe there's something that is very niche and specific. So maybe you don't need to pitch that or have that in your offer, right? Let's say you're a landscaper, and let's say that you remove poison ivy or something like that, right? Well, you don't really want to start off with, hey, I'll do your lawn and remove poison ivy, right? Maybe not everyone has poison ivy. So you would just be like, kind of confusing your client at that point. So that's like the biggest thing, is just like simplify your offer. That way you don't run into or run off or run into the conversion cliff, which is, the more features that you sell, the harder it will be to sell, because people are going to get overwhelmed by how many options that they have.
Absolutely. That's the thing, when it comes down to explaining, again, sometimes, we're so caught up in our product and our service, and we know the benefits that it can serve and it can do. But when you overwhelm, you got to understand that when you're dealing with business owners and, small business or whatever line of business they're in, they're already busy with a lot of things. So when we come in to show them what our product or service can provide for them, a lot of times, if it isn't clear and concise where they can understand and it's simplified, then you run into that conversion cliff. And when that client gets to that conversion cliff, the confused mind generally just says no. That this is not for me. I don't think this is what it is. And it's not that you're doing anything bad. It's just sometimes we over explain it. So simplify it, right? Like, I've been told this before, the simple way is we only sell chocolate or vanilla. You know what I mean? The other guys down the street have everything else, but that confusion, a lot of times they're not that busy, so you just get the basics, the simple, and that's what sells. So simple is what sells, and keeping that in mind when you're building your products and stuff like that. Yeah, it has all the extra features, but that's what upgrades are for. And then once the client understands the basics and they start to fool around with your product or your service and they understand, they get a little familiar, then at that point, when they're comfortable with it, they'll ask you, what else can it do? And then you're there to explain and help them. So in the beginning, guys, always keep everything simple as possible.
Exactly. And even the step of onboarding someone, right? Or maybe not even full onboarding, but getting them to say like, sure, I'll try it out, or sure, let me get into contact with you, right? So once you propose your offer, simplify and streamline that process of, okay, now that they've said yes, what happens now, right? So, maybe having like a quick little web page that has, like a setup, which will have a little form that they fill out, and then like a calendar, right? Three steps, right? They fill out their name, they book on the calendar, and then boom, they get an email, right? Something that can happen within a minute. That way, you're not pulling from their attention span. They're not feeling overwhelmed by, oh, I have to fill out all this information. No, it's just a way for them to have some level of commitment to you, which would be booking on your calendar, right? And so you want that to be as frictionless as possible, because let's say you give your offer and let's say you're going door to door and you're selling to local businesses. Well, every minute that you're there, they're gonna feel like, okay, now what? Now what? Oh, he's like he's still talking to me, And so unless they're genuinely interested, then all the time is like that's not an issue. But if your offer is bad, it's just gonna feel like okay, well, when is this guy over, or when is this guy gonna stop talking about whatever the service is? It comes off like a Jehovah's Witness of sorts. Whenever they don't take no for an answer, they keep talking to you, right? So you don't want to become that person, but you also want to make sure that the process is streamlined to where whenever they do say yes, you're out of their hair within a minute or so.
Yeah, that's the proven process, right? It's a strategy for capturing your offer, like basically on a single piece of paper. If it takes you more than one page to explain it, then it's already, confusing. That's why they even call it an elevator pitch. If you can't say what you're selling in 30 seconds, then you don't fully understand it. You know what I'm saying? Where you can explain it to a 10-year-old and they get it. So that's how simple you have to kind of break things down, especially in this time, where attention span is just so shortened. People just don't have time for it, so it has to make sense, and it has to be simple, straight to the point, like Joe said earlier, if you go to Walmart, you already know in the automotive section, they just do tires and oil changes. You know what I mean? They don't do brakes. They don't do all this extra stuff. They just do oil changes and tires. That's it. So very simplified, very to the point, and their pricing is available. So when your proven process is, everything should be simplified. So like Joe just said as well, is that, your website shouldn't be so complex that they have to click 50 links just to find out how to sign up. You know what I mean? It should be information on the first page, a prompt up, sign up. We send you an email and you get an automatic, onto our scheduling platform and go. So it should just be like 1, 2, 3. So when you're building these systems out, you're building out, your product, your service that you're going to sell, you're going to do, try to scale it back. If it's down to, 2, 3, 4 pages to explain all the bells and whistles, put all the bells and whistles on one page, the most important thing that's going to benefit the client.
Exactly. And make sure that it's very tangible, right? Like, if you have a service or whatever, maybe you can't provide a demo, but you could provide the social proof, which is like, hey, like if you're a construction worker or whatever, you can pull up some pictures of job sites that you've worked at, or, just something to give the business owner something tangible that they could look at, or that they could kind of interact with, either while you're there or, once you leave, right? Like, let's say you're a website builder. Well, you could just say like, hey, go to my website and I have a bunch of projects, or, I have a list of, or I have a gallery of all the websites I've made, right? So that will help them, while you're gone, think about what you could do for them. And just something very tangible, like, try not to overpromise, because then they're going to expect a lot whenever you do fulfill it. Or, they'll build up something in their mind that is not what you're actually try to lay out for them. So again, the simpler your offer is, the less guesswork that the client has to do, and that way they're not like, oh well, it's going to be this and that. Well, maybe you only wanted to offer two things out of those things. And so kind of want to pivot to a lot of Alex Hormozi's stuff talks about how to value things, and like how to really value like time and effort, and stuff like that. And so basically what he talks about is like maximizing the dream outcome, right? The gap between reality and desire. Some another form of that is like heaven and hell, right? So basically what is like, you want to lay out your offer in a way that it appeals to the client to be like, hey, I know that times are kind of tough right now, and let's say, or how would you feel if you had $2,000 more in your pocket every month? And then they're like, huh, $2,000 more in my pocket every month. And then they're like, okay, well, what next? Like, well, now that they're imagining $2,000 in their pocket, right, the dream outcome, what is the likelihood of you achieving that, right? So in your offer, it should cover those things.
Absolutely. And one of the things, just to touch back on, the tangible, is when let's say you're doing a website as a product for a business or service, what I would recommend is, since you have the skills, build the website out already for their business. You can host it on your own domain, so that way you can show them something, So all the time, that's important to, show them the benefits, show them what they have and what they could have. So this moves us into this point right here, the perceived, the dream outcome, because what they have is, their rebuttal to you is like, well, it's been serving me, this far. Yeah. But when you're talking about, if you had these extra features, let's just say like a chat bot, for instance, as an example, that extra feature right there where it can answer questions for you when you're not available, that's going to help them to lock in the customer and, bring more profit into their business, because a lot of businesses, believe it or not, are not doing that because they think it's, it's a waste of time, or it's a waste of money, or it's a waste, whatever. So it's great when those people think like that, because, they won't try it, but you have the ones that will try it and they'll use your service. So those are the people you're going after anyways, is the ones that want to do, and you want to stay away from the ones that don't want to. And this is the other reason why, for being like lean and simple, is because you're able to be a little bit more agile. When you have to explain stuff and you have to do all these extra features and bells and whistles, it kind of slows down the process. And, that's where people begin to, waste a lot of time, and then, you kind of lose the client, and all the client really wants, they don't want to go back and forth. They want kind of like a done for you service. You know what I mean? And that is what people pay for, that done for you service, because it removes them from having to do all this stuff. And that's where you become the expert and you shine. And because you kept it simple, and the client understands what you do, they're going to recommend you to their friends and, their peers, because it's like, well, this is what they done for me. So that done for you service is kind of where you want to be, and just keep it simplified.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And, within that, the done for you stuff, right? You can really like, in your offer, or while you're talking to them, kind of talking about rebuttals and stuff like that Henry's talking about, you could list out a bunch of the problems or pain points that, right, if you're diligent, and if you look into the business, look into the business industry, and you can target some pain points that that you can that you can offer a solution for, then basically you can go in there to any meeting and be like, hey, I know that as a landscaping guy, a lot of your clients come from referrals. Well, do you want an automated referral system where, at the end of every appointment, you ask, or there's like an automated message to ask for a referral and a review, right? And so that right there, they're like, I never thought about that, right? So then you can just keep going down the list of like what you can offer, right? If your product or service is good enough, but you start with that initial offer. Hey, do you want like automated referral and feed reviews, right? So that was the offer, the original offer, but then you go in and you kind of tell them like, hey, I could solve all these other issues for you as well, right? So that's just like a kind of like a way to kind of like value stack, right? You really stack on the value of like, hey, if you allow me to help you improve your business, I can solve all of these pain points for you.
Absolutely, and that's the thing, value stacking, um, and all that again, is just gonna come when you're simplifying things, and making it simple for people, and you know, a lot of times I think we just get so caught up in like the over promise, under deliver, and that's kind of where a lot of businesses have, got a bad taste in their mouth because you're not the first person to come and solicit them, right? And we probably won't be the last person. So, when you're working on your rebuttals, what I use is, I use AI and I run it through and give it all the excuses that I can think that most companies would come up with. And, you can use that as a tool to kind of help you to reframe the way, you're selling your service or your product, as opposed to, sitting there and arguing with them. You kind of already have that, upper hand advantage because you're prepared, So I think that's one of the other things too that we lack in is we're not really fully prepared because we're just seeing, we're just seeing the benefit that it can do for a business, but sometimes we don't understand what the business is actually going through. And I can say that from experience. I was just sharing that with Joseph a little while ago, how I was talking to a customer who owns a local pet store, and I was asking them, like what their pain points are and, how maybe, a product that I have can help them. And they actually didn't even know their pain points, and I just had to like probe and ask a lot of things. And, we got to some good ground, but, at the end of the day, it's like, okay, cool. So how I can help them is this way. So, I offered some solutions and stuff, and, they're mulling it over right now. They're thinking about it, but I'm learning from that, So I'm saying that to say this, that, you have to ask, if you don't know. You have to get around people and take that data and use it, for your advantage. And that way, when you're selling, as you're putting your product or service out there, it gets a little bit easier because you're not going to always get the yes, like right away that, oh man, that's a great product. It's going to serve, all my needs. It's a done for you service. You're going to have to, prove the concept. So that's why we're saying like, have something tangible, and that's going to be very helpful for you.
Exactly, and something that I've been kind of that I've really undervalued and underappreciated, but I see it in a lot of different places. But also tell them the perceived value, or like basically how much your service could cost, but what this is what you actually charge, right? So maybe like, maybe if you're approaching local businesses, especially, you could do some research on a local business that has a very similar model to you, but they're charging 2x, 3x what you would do, right? So what you could do is say, well, I could do the service, or these people can do the same service for you, but I'm doing it at 2x or 3x or a half, or if not a third of the cost, right? And so, or if you don't want to do that per se, if you want to continue stacking your offer, you could be like, oh well, I'll throw in this service for you that would cost, it would cost me $200 to do but I'm going to waive that fee for you, right? And maybe it doesn't cost you, maybe it doesn't cost $200, but it's just a way to like make the deal seem sweeter, right? Because if you don't make it sweet enough for them, they're not going to want it, right? And so that kind of takes us into our last topic, which is like risk reversal, right? So if you're not making it sweet enough for them, well, maybe you can make it to where all of their rebuttals or all of their main problems with buying your service are minimized because you're already ready to like rebut those main barriers of entry.
Absolutely. And the key thing is your product or your service should, like fix a pain point for their business, right? People are only moved by two things, either pain or pleasure, right? So if you can find the pain point and, resolve that issue, your product serves that issue, and it either frees up, resources, time, finances for them, and gives them some of that back, and it's very simple for them to understand, then it's a no-brainer. It's an easy sell, slam dunk, so keep it simple, guys. That's our message today, is standardize your grand slam offer. Just keep it very, very simple. Don't oversell it. Don't overhype it. Just, this is what it does. This is how it can help a business. And, the key thing is to get your first reviews, your first, beta testers, if you will, so we're saying like the first few, yeah, you might not make no money, but the whole thing is that you have that tangibility that you can show the next client, and then you have somebody that can vouch and say, yeah, this is actually pretty decent and it works, and avoid that conversation, or conversion cliff, I should say, so if you're losing the client, it's because you're overwhelming them and it just doesn't make any sense. So at that point, pretty much the deal's done. They're not going to buy, they're not going to bite, they're not going to take it. So, just keep it simple, keep it as simple as possible. Use the visual roadmap, the proven process, like I said, just if it takes you 2 to 3 pages to explain it, that sounds like a manual. Nobody wants to read a manual. How many times you bought something, you didn't read the manual? You just jumped right into it. You know what I'm saying? So like 1 page, if you can't explain it in 1 page, then, you don't fully understand it. So keep it like, that 30-second elevator pitch, and that's going to build that confidence in you and in your client that it's very simple. And then again, tangible. If you're doing like a website for them, show them what it would look like with a chat bot. Build it on your domain, host it, show them, boom, and they can interact with it and spend that time, learning their business or the things, because that really shows that you're vested in their business and ready to work with them, and then just keep it simple, guys. That's the moral of the message, is just keep it as simple as possible, and get out there, ask questions, find out where your product would serve best and who it would serve best, because in this you're going to find out who your actual client is, because a lot of times we think our product is great for every business, but when you start to narrow it down, you're going to start to see like what businesses it serves out that sign up with you and use your product, and then you can expand from there. So with that, I want to bring Joe back on if he has any closing thoughts before we close it out.
Yeah. I just want to second everything that you just said, right? Keep it simple. I know that we went through a lot of different things and a lot of different elements, but all of those constraints are there to make your offer simpler, right? If you go back and listen to all the different criteria, right, it's a lot to remember, or it's a lot to take into consideration, but all of that is just to strengthen your offer, because a triangle only has 3 points, but it's the most secure shape, or it's the most stable shape in that we have. And so simplicity is scalable. And I want to give a shout out to our community. We have a community of like-minded people where they are tired of doing everything alone. We have practical self-growth tools, community support, and weekly structure to help you stay focused and follow through with whatever you're trying to do. So that's at backtobrilliance.com. If you scroll down to our community section, you'll be linked up with like-minded people like you.
Well said. All right. Thank you guys for tuning into our podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment or review. It helps great people like you find our podcast. And with that, we're out. Until the next time, stay blessed.
Have a good one.